I wanted to give a little bit of more background of the lucid dreaming experiences that I've had. As I said in a previous video, it began when I was around 4 or 5. Can't remember the exact age. I used to have really awful night terrors, and I think my mom was just getting tired of having me wake her up all the time because I was scared. And she told me to tell my dreams that I'm not afraid of them. And that was the first time I ever realized that I could be aware while dreaming, that I thought about attempting to be aware while dreaming. And on my very first try, I did it. I lucid dreamt, and I told the lion in that zoo in my dream, "I'm not afraid of you." And that was the beginning of my lucid dreaming experiences. After that, pretty much every dream was a lucid dream. And because I had so many nightmares as a child, I was literally just using lucid dreaming as a way to quell my nightmares by changing the outcome or giving myself a superpower in order to get away, somehow changing the dream so that I could feel safe within the dream. When I got a little bit older, I learned about dream interpretation. I learned that your subconscious mind is speaking to you through your dreams. And that's when I thought to myself, maybe I shouldn't be constantly manipulating my dreams. Maybe I ought to sit back and learn how to observe them. And I started a dream journal. I started writing down every dream that I had. I stopped trying to change them. I'm like, if I'm aware that they're a dream, it's not that crazy to just sit there observing and experiencing the dream. I think the worst thing that ever happened or came of that is that I used to frequently dream about people shooting at me or chasing me with a gun. And I think that had to do with, when I was very young, I witnessed a suspect from a drive-by shooting loading his gun while driving past me. This is a real instance. Nobody believed me, and then that same day, a few hours later, there was a drive-by shooting 2 neighborhoods over, or 2 blocks over, under the same description of the car that I had described. So anyway, I used to have a lot of nightmares about being shot at. And when I started just observing my dreams and allowing things to unfold how they unfold, I got shot quite a lot within my dreams, and I would wake up suddenly, like with a jolt, and I would literally feel like a twinge or a pain in the middle of my spine. Anyway, all that to say, I started just observing my dreams, letting them take place, and then writing them down and trying to figure out the message that the universe, or at that point just my subconscious, was trying to tell me. And through observation, I started learning that there were different types of dreams. There were ones that I would have that I always felt, okay, these are definitely prophetic, and it's like a larger message for a larger audience, because it seemed to be predicting something, or it would have some kind of a cryptic symbolic message. And generally the ones that were prophetic, I would have them repeatedly. And usually when I have a repeated dream, it's more like repeated themes, and the outcomes are different, or different details are different, and that's generally like some kind of like a latent fear that your subconscious mind is trying to communicate to you, shifting ideas around that fear or that trauma. That's why it's never the same, or at least never exactly the same. But when it's a prophetic dream, it's always the same, like down to the last detail. And it tends to be like a parable or like an actual story with a conscious line of thought that you can follow, whereas a dream from your subconscious mind is not like a steady stream of thought that you can follow. There's all kinds of weird interruptions. Characters change, the point of view will sometimes change, the whole story will sometimes change. So messages from the subconscious mind are generally a little bit more chaotic, whereas messages from the superconscious mind seem to be a lot more organized. Prophetic dreams tended to be repetitive, always exactly the same down to the last detail. And then of course, also within the superconscious is like that whole collective conscious that you can tap into. And those were also cryptic, and sometimes repetitive, but they also shifted quite a lot, because it's almost, the collective conscious is almost like everybody's subconscious in one big cloud, right? And so it doesn't follow one line of thought. It changes and shifts based on like shifting ideas within the collective. And then you have your precognitive dreams, which are very much deja vu-ish. And there's 2 different types of deja vu dreams. There's the deja vu dreams where it's like literal deja vu. You dream about something, you totally forget about it, you don't remember it until you experience it in real life, and then you just have this feeling of, oh, I've been here before, or I've felt this before, or I've seen this exact sequence of events before somewhere. And then there's the deja vu type dreams that are more like you wake up feeling like you didn't sleep because you basically dreamed about living a day in your normal life, and it was very similar to the reality that you're already living. And there are several different things within this. Sometimes it can be exactly like a day in your life. You feel like you dreamt about like Groundhog's Day or something. You just like relived a normal day in your life. But sometimes things are slightly off in the dream. And these dreams have to do with shifting realities. If your reality is about to go through a big shift based on perceptions or patterns of behavior, you can, by observing these types of dreams and really observing how you feel within that dream, if you feel good, okay, there's a good shift coming, stay on that same track, stay consistent with what it is you're doing because you're about to shift upwards a dimension. If it doesn't feel good or it feels unsettled, then there's something in your perspective that needs to shift, because otherwise you're heading in a trajectory that's going to shift you downwards a dimension. And if it's exactly the same as your life, it could be the universe trying to signify to you that you're in a stagnant period in your life where there's no growth. You've kind of hit a plateau. You're running out of ideas. When it comes to like precognitive deja vu type dreams, there are so many different things that could be trying to communicate to you. I always feel like it's a part of time that I have lived before, that there's some kind of like hopping out of the timeline, a bit of a jump, and it's generally a jump back and forth. But for some reason, or at some point in the timeline, I jumped into that point in the timeline and experienced it. Generally, I have a hunch that the reason is because there's something in that moment that I am supposed to do differently. The universe is calling attention to that moment because if I do the predictable, expected thing in that moment, I'm going to get the same outcome, and there's something within that outcome that my higher self is trying to communicate. You know, there might be a better outcome here if you just tweak this moment a little bit. So I tend to do unpredictable things, not make the decision that I would normally make in that moment when I'm having a deja vu moment. A lot of times just that pause that we have, like, whoa, I've seen this before, I've lived this before. A lot of times just that break in the moment of realizing that you've seen it, felt it, heard it, whatever, is enough to tweak it. That's generally, I mean, I think that's the point, is kind of like restart, break, pause, you know, and without that pause, you know, something else could have happened that shouldn't have. So that's basically what I've learned from just observing my dreams, and there's probably a lot more that's not coming to mind right now, so I'll throw more stuff in as I think of it, but that's on observing my dreams. And then there's another part to this. I'm going to do a second part, because after I observed my dreams for so long, there's some more experimentation that I decided to do. So come back for part 2. There were some things that I left out after. So I've also had dreams where I was tapping into the Akashic Library. That is a very specific place. And I know, like, a lot of people describe it as looking the same or similar, and then there's accounts of people describing something that looks very different. And I've had several dreams in the Akashic Library, and I can tell you exactly why that is. It's because the actual library itself is enormous. There are so many different like areas and different rooms and so many different doors that you can go into, and depending on which door you go into, like, it's a very diverse architectural building that varies greatly depending on where you are in the building. But anyway, it's a library, and when you pick out a book, you don't read the book. You get sucked into the book and you relive your past lives. So, and that's a superconscious or a subconscious thing, because both your superconscious and your subconscious are connected in different ways to your past life. I found that, you know, if it's coming from your superconscious, you end up getting a lot of details. It's very vivid. You feel like you're living it again. If it's your subconscious, it's more murky. It's like a memory that you can barely remember. It's kind of like foggy in the same way that a deja vu moment is kind of foggy, where it's like, I can't remember where I've seen this before, but this is definitely something that has happened. And then sometimes you have different entities visit you in your dream. So sometimes they're not pleasant entities. This is generally where we experience things like sleep paralysis. A lot of people have reported feeling very scared during those sleep paralysis moments, and a lot of people have reported seeing shadow beings, either when they wake up or right before they woke up within a dream. They feel like they're being held down by something. It can be really scary, but from my experience, if you don't give them your fear and your attention, if you calm yourself down and realize that paralysis is going to pass, there is something in your brain, like a trigger in your brain, that causes that, and it is eventually going to wear off. So even if there is a physical entity there, they feed off of your fear, and if you don't feed them your fear, they can't do anything to you, and eventually the paralysis is going to wear off and you're going to be fine. I've had other entities visit me in my dreams. There was a monk that visited me in my dream and gave me some wisdom. And how I knew that it was an actual person is because we were having an actual conversation, and the wisdom that he gave me, like, it felt like an actual moment with an actual person that I could connect with. And it was everything made sense. What he was saying was advice that I actually needed. I was able to speak to him about something that was literally had been on my mind bothering me, and he gave me relevant advice. And I'm not sure if this was like a different part of myself, like maybe a higher part of myself giving myself advice, or if it was an actual like spirit guide or entity of some kind. I had talked about this dream at one point. I'll tell it again though, because that video, the music kind of overpowers what I'm saying. You can barely hear me. And then the other thing is you can get informational downloads, and there are lots of different types of informational download. And I'm still learning how to decipher where exactly they come from. I do believe that sometimes they come from source, sometimes they come from your guides, sometimes they come from angels, sometimes they come from your higher self, or the collective, like ideas from the collective. But generally, like ideas for collectives, that's when you like wake up and you suddenly have like an idea for a new song or a new poem or a new invention, or all of a sudden you're like, you understand a concept in science or a field that you've been studying. You have like a eureka moment. Okay, that's generally, I think, when we're pulling ideas from the collective, it's when you wake up and suddenly have like that eureka moment for something. And generally within that moment, you have this feeling of like, I couldn't possibly have come up with this idea on my own. And that's how you know it came from the collective and not from yourself. Because you can have eureka moments in your dreams and have it come from your subconscious mind, like actually come from you and be your idea. But the informational downloads that I get that I believe are from source, generally they put me in some kind of a scenario where I have some kind of, it's almost like I'm in an escape room and I have riddles and things that I need to solve and figure out. And I'm put through those scenarios in order to learn some kind of complex concept that I wouldn't understand if someone was explaining it to me in plain speech. So the dream that I shared about the sound bowls was very much like a download from source, where I was put into a situation to kind of solve a puzzle to figure out what it is that the universe was trying to communicate. There's just so much that can happen within your dreams. It's the craziest thing. Anyway, so that's, extra that I just thought of about learning to observe my dreams and things that I've learned through that. Okay, so there's 2 videos before this one that are all about how I went from lucid dreaming in order to control my nightmares to lucid dreaming in order to observe what it is that either my subconscious or the universe was trying to tell me. After enough observation and enough picking apart, trying to figure out where all these different dreams were coming from, the purposes of them, how to interpret things from my subconscious mind, then I began wondering what further experimentation I could do. Once I started learning about how to connect into the collective, there was one instance that I had of dreamscaping. Dreamscaping is when you enter somebody else's dream and you experience the same dream together. I did this with my very best friend at the time, and we both had a dream. We had a dream that we were the pirates. She was Anne Bonny and I was Mary Read. And for some reason in this dream we were sisters and Captain Jack Sparrow was our dad. It was the weirdest thing ever, but we had the exact same dream. We called each other, told each other about it on the phone, and we're like, oh my god, like exact same dream. We were like, you were there, I was there, we were together. It was crazy. That is, again, that's called dreamscaping. It's the only time that I've ever done it. At least I think it is. I don't know. There have been other instances where I feel like certain people are in my dream, but I've never had the guts to like reach out and ask them, hey, did you have a dream about such and such last night? Because I just didn't want them to think that I was crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's the only time that I've done it. The next experimentation that I started doing was when I hit my teens. I was super interested in psychology and this idea that our brains worked very similarly to a computer. That we had a lot of programs running in the background. Some of them were put there by trauma. Some of them were put there by our upbringing, how we were raised and taught to believe. Some of these programs were biological. Most of them, though, are based off of experience or our personality. But according to psychology and the different methods that you use just within different therapies and things, a lot of these programs can be rewritten. Started getting into the idea of hypnotism, which this is basically what hypnotism is a rewriting of your brain's programs while in certain brainwave frequencies like theta and delta that you experience while sleeping. And so I thought to myself, if observing my dream is allowing my subconscious mind to speak to me about these programs, is changing my dreams intentionally a way of reprogramming those programs? Can it be used that way, is what I asked myself. Generally, the conversation that happens between our subconscious and our conscious, or our superconscious and our conscious, is a one-way connection. Either we are giving information to our sub or superconscious via experiences that we're having, or it is giving us those messages back after processing them to decide how they feel or think about it. But a two-way dialogue is actually pretty rare, in my opinion. And so what I began to do is I would sit in my dreams and I would observe them. And as I observed them, I would interpret. At this point, I had gotten pretty fast at interpreting my own dreams based on how I was feeling within the dream. And I already had a pretty good database, like running memory in my mind of like what symbols and colors and things meant what. And so I would translate in real time what it was my subconscious mind was trying to speak to me. And then I would make a very quick decision about whether or not that was a program or a thought that I felt was a good program or a bad program. And I would begin manipulating the dream as a way of speaking back to my subconscious and reframing the way that it felt about that concept or experience. A lot of my shadow work that has to do with fixing my traumas happened for me in the dream world. A lot of the deprogramming that I did from the harmful dogma that I was fed through just growing up in different Christian churches. A lot of the doctrines in most modern day churches are based on fear, shame, and guilt. And there was a lot there that I had to reprogram and unpack. And I did most of that unpacking and reprogramming in the dream setting. And it was only after I began reprogramming my mind that I began to be open to receive messages from the superconscious. And that was around 13 years old. I had been writing dream journals and things like that for quite some time at that point. So that's been, my journey up until now with using lucid dreaming in order to heal myself, understand the world around. And I want to delve into just basic dream interpretation, share with you some of the different dreams that I've had. I've already shared a couple, but there are a few particular ones that were very interesting. One in particular that I believe was prophetic. So I'll be getting into that, and as well as like giving tips on how to begin lucid dreaming if you don't know how yet. There's also dream travel or dream walking, which I'm not as experienced with, but I will begin to touch on that in later videos as well. That's literally exploring the macrocosm, which is pretty exciting. And it's crazy how many people actually do this. This is like where you hear the stories of like, oh, don't talk to the people in your dreams, don't like ask them what day it is, or weird stories like that. Those are happening where it gets weird and like people start coming after you for asking questions like that. That's people that are dream walking that are having those experiences. Like you're literally in a different dimension. And I misspoke, it's not the macrocosm, it's the microcosm, because there's as above, so below, right? So there's a macrocosm, which if you're going to travel that, you have to leave the body, so through astral projection, or, the furthest you can travel is if you're remote viewing, which is just your consciousness leaving your body. Astral projection is your spirit leaving your body. Remote viewing is your consciousness. But your astral body is connected to you on a tether. It looks like an umbilical cord, and everyone's umbilical cord or tether for their astral body is a different length. But you can only go as far as your tether will allow you to. Whereas when you remote view, it's like a radio signal and you can project it literally anywhere. But there are portals and things, like mirrors are a portal that you can travel through when your astral body is disconnected from your body. And you're able to travel further when you make use of portals. When you're traveling the microverse within you, you're still within your body, but there are portals that exist within your body. I think that they are the chakras, but we'll get into that later.